Leave you and create. See it as innate in the dream room. Yeah, we're bringing dreams to life in the place to shine in the dream room. Yeah.
Today's conversation is about emotional intelligence, not the laminated kind on a corporate wall or buried in a leadership buzzword deck. This is emotional intelligence forged under pressure, tested by real consequences, and built where reacting meant survival and pausing meant growth. From Oakland streets to incarceration, from expungement to supervising the very system he once cycled through, his journey moved from pain to a methodology now shaping leaders in classrooms, boardrooms, and institutions. My guest today is DB Bedford, also known as the EI Guy. His is a story of self-regulation, accountability, and what it truly takes to lead, starting with yourself. DB, thanks for being here.
Well, I appreciate that. That was one great intro. I appreciate that.
Oh, it's my pleasure. So, your origin story, before we get into EI 365 or leadership frameworks, how do you describe who you are today beyond titles?
That's a good question. Who I am today is someone who is dedicated to the service of others. And the capacity is that I have seen and experienced in my life way too many times how one bad decision in a moment changes the trajectory of people's lives. Mm-hmm. And what it looks like during that process can be heartbreaking. And so if I can be someone that influences people to just slow down for a second, and even if you're emotionally charged about something, you can just make a different decision. It feels like that's where I'm supposed to be. So I get up every day naturally looking for an opportunity to share. And I'm very, I call myself a behavior detective, because I'm always paying attention to my own behavior and the behaviors of others. Even like this morning when I came outside to come see you, construction people from next door, my neighbors getting an ADU built, an additional unit built, and they always block my driveway. Mm-hmm. As soon as I looked out the window, I was pissed. And I'm like, here they go again. And I know it's a story you tell yourself, and it's rightfully so. I should be upset. But by the time I got outside, I had to think about it, and I just politely asked them to move it and try to pay attention to not doing it in the future. And more so for me, not them, because I didn't want to bring that negative energy to where I'm going next. And in this case, it's coming to see you. So if I was super emotionally charged, escalate that in a situation, it got out of hand, then by the time I got here today, my energy would be unsettled. And so who I am today is a person that's very intentional about my behavior and helping to neutralize the behaviors of others.
Excellent. You've said the streets of Oakland were your first classroom. What lessons did they teach you about emotion, power, and survival?
Man, if you let your emotions overpower your intelligence, you can get killed out here. You can end up in jail. You can end up disabled. You can lose a relationship that's very important to you. Just growing up in the streets of Oakland and in that time frame, I've made the decision. I've seen so many people make decisions that when it's all said and done, they're not proud of, and we all wish we could have made a different decision and shorten our learning curve, if you will. And so when you get emotionally charged, I learned in the streets that it can lead to death or it can lead to jail, and that made it very high of importance and priority to me. And so that's probably the biggest lesson I learned from being in the streets.
During that stage in your life, what emotions were driving you the most, do you think?
Anger, stress, depression, fear. Mm-hmm.
But emotions don't disappear when they're unnamed. They just take the wheel, right?
Yeah, for sure.
When you were incarcerated, how did that environment either reinforce or challenge the identity you had built?
Well, when I was incarcerated, I'm a pretty popular person in the Bay Area. So when you popular and you have a huge network of people, it could be misleading because you can get in jail and it can feel like like a party a little bit, right? Like,
Mm,
you know what I'm saying? Like
yeah.
you can lose sight of it, but I didn't. I was hyper focused on this decision that I made, like how did I get there? Because I was more concerned about me not doing that again. And so the time that I was in jail, I just I tried so hard not to get comfortable, not to make it feel like a norm, not to minimize it. I tried to feel it every day that I was in there. I would get bothered by just not being able to put my hands in pockets,
Hmm.
or get up in the middle of the night and go to the refrigerator. Like I would not lose sight of the things that I had taken for granted. And so the thing that I learned the most, because what got me there was allowing my emotions to overpower things I knew I needed to do. And so being in there, it just gave me an opportunity to really analyze. I didn't know it would take me to where I am today, but I didn't know I would become like this, well-renowned, trainer, speaker on the subject. That wasn't it. It was like I was trying to save my own life. I was trying to save myself from myself.
Hmm. That's beautiful. What was it about Judge Larry Goodman that made you feel seen rather than managed?
Oh, Goody. I call him Goody. uh, I think the first time I recognized I was being seen is just when he called me DB.
Oh.
Because when you're in the court system, you go by your last name or your PFN number. And he just would call me DB. He'd be like, DB, and he would say things. And he would seek insight from me about the community that I lived in. He didn't try to tell me what to do. He was curious about what he can learn, and then he would guide me on how to make it better, by this program that he had in his courtroom that he wanted me to be a part of. And originally, I thought he was doing it for me,
Mm.
but he wasn't. He was doing it for the people in the program because he knew my level of influence. He could see something in me
Hmm.
that I didn't see in myself. I'm not saying he was disregarding, but as we've been friends for now 25, 30 years, what I see is that he's seen that I could reach the audience that he was trying to help. And so he needed me in that capacity. Me getting help was a byproduct of it. Me discovering this gift of influence for positivity was just a byproduct of it. But he did tell me directly that he felt like I had a superpower and I was using it for evil.
Oh,
And he was like,
interesting.
man, if you just use it for good, and basically he would help show me the way. And at the time, I just wanted to get out of jail. So I just agreed. I'm like, sure, but every day that I was in that program and watching him, the district attorney, the public defender's office, be reverence this unknown relationship building skills I had in the community became more fascinating. And so once I realized that this was a thing, I was all in.
Awesome. You talk about transformation not being one big moment, but a series of micro decisions. What was the first one that mattered?
On this journey of kind of redemption would be the micro moment of not taking advantage of being let out of jail early to be in the program. So I was facing about 8 years in prison, and I had probably been in jail almost a year. And the judge invited me into this program. It's called the Crossroads Mentoring Program.
Mm.
And if I agreed to come into it, I didn't have to go to prison, but they put this waiver over my head. If you ever came back for anything, then you go do that full sentence. And then back in the day, like sometimes if you get out early or get off too soon, you kind of think you got over. And then if you listen to like jailhouse lawyers or, your homeboys at the time that's on a low frequency, they'll try to juice you up and be like, oh man, they didn't have nothing. If they'd have had something, they wouldn't let you go. And so it'll distract you. And I think the best decision that I made was not to fumble that opportunity and to really realize that not only is it an opportunity for me, but it's an opportunity for others. You know what? I'll say this. I'll sum that up by saying the minute I start thinking more about others than I did for myself, I think that was a real transformative moment in my life by always thinking about what others can benefit from. Yeah, I would say that was it, around 95, 96.
Okay. What did learning to pause before reacting feel like in the beginning? Was it uncomfortable? Was it risky?
Frustrating, still frustrating.
Really?
Yeah, like I said, I was frustrated this morning,
Hmm.
with the construction workers. The pause can be uncomfortable, but I understand the value of it. So it's worth whatever frustration that I'm sitting in. I know it's a passing moment. I try to be very intentional not to get emotionally hijacked. And like you mentioned, those micro moments of life, I look at every throughout our day that we have these moments of micro moments, which are short windows of experiences where you have this kind of emotional exchange.
Hmm.
And I do my best to be mindful not to get emotionally hijacked. It doesn't always work.
Okay.
And when it doesn't work, I don't stay there though. And my signal or my check engine light on myself is if I'm not feeling joy, if I'm not feeling happy, if I'm not feeling calm, ease, then I know I need to reverse engineer whatever that last moment was because I want to pack light. I want to maximize the goodness in every day. And so if I can't see it, if I can't feel it, I know something prior has hijacked it, so I get to work, so I can release myself.
When you began naming emotions instead of acting them out, what surprised you the most about yourself?
That you probably the amount of clarity that you get when you can identify. Uh, I've learned that you just can't manage, saying what you're not willing to measure. And so you can't measure it if you can't identify it. And so, when I say reverse engineer something, it's like looking back and identifying what was the trigger, what was I feeling, why was I feeling like that, and not trying to give myself permission to say that I shouldn't feel like that. Like if I'm gonna be mad, I could be mad. That's not the problem. It's what I act on
Hmm.
during that mad. If I'm frustrated, if I'm this, if I'm that, sad, depressed, or even happy. Sometimes you can do too much in joy. You can maybe share information too soon because you're excited,
Ah, yeah.
and then people, get in the way of your something you had going on. I used to see it happen in the work environment a lot. So, for me, it's just about. I think that the surprising piece of like how when I say clarity, meaning just how much your world will open up. You can see things so much different. And I'll button that up by saying I think the most surprising thing is understanding that you can choose how you experience the day.
Mm. What was it like stepping into Alameda County Probation Department, knowing your history and knowing theirs?
Well, for me, it was like the best thing ever. I mean, when I got that call from Human Resources, and they was like, because I had applied for over 3 years and kept
Oh,
getting to, yeah, even though I had my record expunged, they would still deny me. And you'd have to wait. And when you apply to be like civil service work, like it takes 6, 8 months to get in, and then if you get denied, they would make you wait a year before you had. If you get disqualified,
oh.
you got to wait a year. So I went over this time and time again. So when I got the call. And, honestly, I tell people in a joking way, I felt like I got drafted like to the NBA.
Oh.
To come from being a 4-time felon, to get my record expunged and where I come from, it was like the biggest opportunity in my life. So when I stepped through those doors, I don't think anybody was as proud, to be on the other side as I was, and then to see officers that were there, and they kind of look at me and be like, man, you look familiar. And as soon as I tell them my name, they're like, oh, no. Like they would, The first couple of months there, they would just be like huddling up and being like, they couldn't believe that I did this transformation. And so it was just very, very exciting time for me. And I loved every bit of it. And then the power of the youth in our community, parents telling them, hey, be on the lookout for DB. If you see DB, that's my folks. So I'd be walking down the halls and somebody be like, hey, it's you, DB? I'd be like, yeah. My mama said, my mama, my uncle. I'd be like, yeah. And I only bring that up to say the sense of safety they felt, when they could reach out to someone, or if somebody I know normally couldn't get through, they, people not calling them back, then they could just text me and I can get them information. It just felt like it put me in a very, I knew I was in alignment with my assignment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You felt of use and value.
Yeah. I felt very, very purposeful.
Yeah. How did your lived experience change the way you exercised authority over others?
I knew it wasn't necessary to exercise my authority. It's like what's understood don't need to be explained. So I hardly ever, exercise my authority. And if I had to, I did it. But I always came back and talked to the person and be like, we had to do that, but let's talk about how it doesn't happen again, and just always try to put care in it. The irony of our motto up there at the time was care, custody, and control. It was like the three C's: care, custody, and control. But so many people had lost the care.
Yeah,
it was just custody and control, and so I was big on the care piece, and it took me a long way, and it helped a lot of young people. And I see a lot of young people today, they're in their 30s and 40s, and I wouldn't recognize them from a can of paint, but they always come up to me and tell me that moment in their time they spent with me, how important it was. And even if they didn't go off and do the right thing later on, whatever lesson I taught them resonated with them. And I think for that's priceless.
That is.
That's priceless.
As a supervisor, what emotional patterns do you notice most in staff when they're under pressure?
Emotional patterns, people kind of go back to I like to call it like their default settings.
Okay.
So, when people don't like something, when people don't agree with something, if they don't understand it, they default back to however they were raised when that happens. And so I learned a long time ago that there are a lot of broken children trapped inside of adult bodies. And so when I see staff get frustrated and they overreact, or they become stubborn, or they become emotionally disconnected, I just recognize that's kind of either unhealed or unaddressed part of them. And so when I was a supervisor directly over people, I tried my best not to take it personal. Sometimes it's hard. You got to remind yourself. And then I try to help them understand where it might be coming from. And before we know it, we're talking more about trying to help them than whatever the act or thing that they did is helping them realize how they got there. So I think a lot of, in work environments, people don't, it's not a lot of personal development that's done. People do professional development. They do all the trainings, but a lot of times people are showing up with a low level of personal development, and that's why we get some of the results that we get when people are not getting along, or bickering about little stuff, or having negative cloud over the organization that they're working in. That's a lot of a lack of self-awareness on their part.
How do you balance compassion and accountability, especially in systems that are often reactive?
Each pace is going to be different. I was in a union environment that was very union driven. When I didn't have high ranking authority, it was tougher, which was my motivating to raise my rank. And so by the time I left the department, I was one of the highest ranking managers there, and I was done intentionally so I didn't have to wrestle with the peanut gallery and all that extra noise. But I do think that just one, understanding whatever your policies and your procedures actually are, and not what people say they are. Because a lot of times people who've been there a long time, they'll start trying to tell new people that's not how we do it. We do it like this. But if something goes bad, if you end up in internal affairs, they go back to the policy. If the law is broken, if there's a liability, they go back to what's written. And I've seen so many people be so far away from the fundamentals because the culture itself is like, nah, they say that, but this is what it really is until something happens. So I think that if people just understand the thing they signed up for, don't let nobody else tell you what it is. Know it for yourself. And for me, knowing it for myself helped balance when people try to take you down this emotional road because they don't feel like it or they don't think it should be like that. It's like when they're all said and done, the reality of it is this is what's in writing. So I did a lot of bringing people back to this is the thing that all of us agreed on when we got hired. And that usually neutralized the negative momentum, at least in that moment. Now, however they feel when they walk off is different,
Right.
but we were still able to get the job done because I would remind them this is what we all agreed on. So you might have feelings about things, but factually, this is what we said we were doing, whatever that mission is.
At what point did you realize this work needed a system and not just storytelling?
My work? Realizing that there was like no follow-up, that the leaders that would bring me in, one, I had to get out my own way of celebrating how great my training was because I'm an experience-based facilitator. So I would always get this was the best training ever. And I realized most trainings are not that well. So when you come in, you got the storytelling, you being impactful, people feel like you're real. But I realized people wasn't doing much with it afterwards. And then some of the same organization would bring me back in a short time later, but they didn't practice anything from the last time. So that made me realize that I needed to take a new look at how I was delivering information and what else could I do on my part to be of more support and help try to get people to pay attention to these proven principles. I'm not going to say it's impossible, but it's going to be very challenging for you to be negative. It'll be very challenging for you to be uncivil. It'll be very challenging for not to manage your emotions if you're practicing these principles. So I became more motivated to find ways to how do I help people implement this in their day-to-day, both on and off the job.
Which of the 11 principles do people resist the most, and why do you think that is?
I don't know about resist. They don't vocalize that piece of it yet. I haven't had a chance to have enough
Feedback?
My feedback, they gas me up a lot. You know what I'm saying? Like I got a lot of 5-star reviews, a lot of this, so I haven't gotten to the point where people have, and I ask though at times I'll be like, please challenge, any one of these, and so I haven't, and I've been doing this for 10 years. I haven't gotten that level of feedback yet. I would like to know because I would like to either validate the principle or consider changing it if I get enough feedback on one.
Well, how about I take advantage of my time with you and
Let's do it.
ask you this one question
Come on with it.
that I resist,
Talk to me.
and that is bring yourself to work. Bring your whole self to work. I'm like, this is a trick.
Yeah.
What am I supposed to do with that? What does that really mean?
I don't even think people know what it really means. You know what I'm saying? I think that it just became something that's kind of cliche. Because wherever you are, there you are, right? You whether you want to or not, you've already brought yourself. It's like when people say, leave your emotions at the door, like, well, I'm supposed to pack them up. And like, what does that even mean, right? You and I both been living long enough to know that we wear masks all day, right? And so people are usually trying to lead with how they want to feel like they're representing themselves, but that doesn't mean, the rest of you is not there for the day. And so I think it's just something, I think that's a leadership or an authority figure's way of trying to say, let's minimize the BS by not bringing the things that are troubling you from outside the work into the workplace. But that's not even really realistic, because whenever we have conflict, it's usually an underlying issue. It's usually not about the thing that's actually happening. It is, I like to call it emotional stacking. It's like people going through those micro moments and stacking these emotional experiences. I think that's where the phrase, the straw that broke the camel's back, come
Yes.
from, right? How can a straw break a camel's back? Well, they're saying after all of these straws, after all of this stuff, this is the thing. And so I think what we always end up seeing is a combination of compounded, negative experiences when people kind of lose their way. So that's saying I don't necessarily think it's a helpful thing to say to people.
Yeah, I didn't find it helpful because I don't know what that means. Like, I think we want a little bit of a mask, right? Like there's a professional self and there's a personal self, and I don't know. There's certain things I think are more appropriate for off work and certain things that are more appropriate for on work behavior and attitudes, I don't know.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean,
Maybe
I've
we
always
just need a better communication of what that actually means. Like, what are you saying to me? Because that really doesn't translate into much.
Yeah. I think people should just be themselves. I mean, I think
Authenticity at the end of the day.
just be you. Like, you know what I mean? I think at some point, it has to be frustrating to smother, like what you really want to say, how you really want to be. That's stressful, not to be able to say what I want to say. Now, I should be at a point in my life that no matter what I have to say, I understand the value of tone, tact, and timing.
For sure.
So, yeah, I always was myself. I never hid. I never, act like I wasn't what I was. I've always been that. And I feel like that's what got me to where I am today. By doing that, I think people love and appreciate that. I mean, even in trainings, that's the first thing people recognize. They'd be like, they appreciate me being like vulnerable and sharing my story. And so, like, what does that tell you right there? Like, we yearn for the true self of each other, because we'll find out that we are more alike than different. It's probably why you invited me here today. You know what I mean? Like, what you seen about me in the training was like, now that's somebody I would love to have in my space. But if I never showed you my true self, I just would have been another. I'm sure you've been to a bunch of trainers. I don't think they all sat in this seat. And so, I think there's a lot of power in being yourself. And if you're afraid of yourself, or if you're embarrassed of yourself or ashamed of yourself, then that's where your level of self-awareness comes in at, and wondering and asking yourself why. Why aren't you proud of your entire self, your whole self? And that starts from within.
That's absolutely, I agree with you. Yeah, I take that in. Thank you. So in today's political and workplace climate, what emotional skills do leaders most underestimate?
That conversation is currency. People just, they don't want to talk things through. They don't want to have the discussion. They want to there's so many things they want to say. We don't talk about that here, but it's a thing. Back to what we were kind of saying, right? If this political environment, if Trump is doing things that's impacting how people are feeling, we should be talking about it, right? And not be afraid that somebody is a Trump supporter and how it's going to make them feel. We should be having the conversation, because if not, we just holding resentment, or we're holding grudges, right? And so I think it's important for conversations to be had, and I think it's important for leaders to check in, not like check off a box, but like check in with their team to see like how people are actually feeling and what they are experiencing, and, because we don't know what it takes for somebody to get to work every single day. But as soon as I come in, you got all these tasks and expectations, and you just, you didn't even, I could have a mother in hospice. I could be wrestling with insulin. I mean, you just don't know what people are going through. True. And we just don't take that under consideration. But if people feel like they're seen and you understand them, you're going to get way more out of them than trying to just like or else, or, threaten them with the lack of promotion or whatever a lot of leaders do. If you just see people for who they are, what they might be going through, and just sometimes, there's three H's that I try to tell leaders about, and it's people either want to be heard, helped, or hugged. Right. And a hug is just an extension of empathy. Right. I mean, everybody's not a hugger, and I don't mean going around hugging your people, but I mean, be in a position like listening. Does this person need to be, they need some help? They just want to be heard, or do they want to be hugged? And I think if people just start, leaders particularly, with that type of frame of mind, they would draw a more cohesive team.
Yeah. What's the biggest misconception about resilience that you see in organizations?
That you got to suffer through it, right? Resilience is just working around resistance, but it doesn't have to be painful. Just because you have a nightmare doesn't mean you got to stop dreaming, right?
For sure.
You know what I'm saying? Just because there was a bad, moment, or yesterday didn't go as well, you don't have to make the rest of the days feel like they have to be a continue of that one. And realizing there's something called, the messy middle.
The messy middle.
Messy middle, right? Everything's a process. So resistance is just a process, right? If I walk into your kitchen in the middle of you cooking, it's going to be messy. You got stuff all over the place. You're going to be like, oh, I got you. Go ahead. Wait for me out there, because you don't want me to see all this mess. If I walk in the middle of surgery, you know what I mean? It's going to look like somebody died up in here, right?
Yeah.
But if I come later, when you all stitched up, and if I come when the meal is prepared, right, it's like, oh, I didn't see the middle, but this is beautiful. And I try to encourage people to zoom out when it feels heavy, and your resilience means you're just going to work through this messy middle, but you don't have to, struggle so hard or punish yourself.
I like that.
During the process.
That's a great way to look at it. It's not endurance necessarily, it's adaptability.
Flexibility. Yeah. They say if you stay flexible, then nothing can get you bent out of shape.
That's for sure. When you look back at your past, do you see it as something you overcame or something you integrated?
Integrated. Integrated. Even if I didn't know I was integrating it, right? But definitely, integrated for sure.
Okay. For someone listening right now who feels trapped by their past or their reactions, what's the first emotionally intelligent step they can take today?
To believe that what's for you will never pass you by. So what you are going through now is like the precursor to something great. And the sooner you can change your perspective on whatever situation that you're going through and understand that it's part of the process, that'll be the first emotionally intelligent thing that you can do, because you'll change the way you feel about it. If you truly believe that whatever you're going through now, like if you can believe that there's a future self, and some people don't believe there's a future self. They don't even conceptualize that 6 months from now, 1 year from now, 3 months from now, 5 years from now, you'll be a different version of yourself, right? And so knowing that what you're learning, right now will be leveraged, right, at a later date. And that should feel powerful.
Mm-hmm. So if people want to get a hold of you and learn more about emotional, or what do you call it?
So right now it used to be emotional intelligence, but we've advanced it to what we call civility intelligence.
Civility intelligence.
Where for the last 10 years we were hyper-focused on the emotions, but now we're focused on behavior. But the best way to reach me, if you're a social media person, DB, the EI guy, will pop up if you Google it. But I'm on Instagram, LinkedIn, TikTok, Facebook. Our website, though, is www.eiconduct.com. But I'm pretty searchable on Google. But civility intelligence is really behavior observation, temperament theory, and what we call the EI code of conduct, which is those 11 self-operating principles that you mentioned earlier. And it's our way of getting position in the market with this terminology that has not been utilized enough. Now, people know what it means to be civil and uncivil, and civility and incivility, but civility intelligence is a phrase that we're coining because we didn't get a chance to. By the time we learned about emotional intelligence and started teaching it, it already existed. It had a history. So we couldn't get position. The only position we got was being kind of a forward face for the culture, right? So for Black and brown communities, they hadn't seen anybody talking about this particular subject matter. So that's how I got kind of popular around it. And in this season of my life, for legacy, I was looking for something that, I could be, Wikipedia, worth like, so, and so we are just coining that phrase. It embodies emotional intelligence, but civility intelligence, the behaviors, the actual actions that you take is super important. And so that's where we're at.
And so how was that born? Like, how did that come about? Tell me the story.
I guess a good question. Thanks for asking. Mm-hmm. So SHRM, the Society of Human Resource Managers, about 2 years ago, in my own personal journey, I was doing a lot of conferences, a lot of seminars, but they were more about how to be a better entrepreneur and be in those rooms. And then I had this moment, I was like, I need to start going to conferences that have the clients that I serve. I need to be in a room with them if I want to, go farther in business. So then I started researching where do they gather. SHRM came up, and SHRM had just launched this campaign around workplace incivility. And they were collecting data on it. And I'm like, when I really looked up civility, I'm like, well, that's what we've been doing the whole time. But one thing we wasn't collecting data. So seeing that they were collecting data, it was like, oh, so we started learning more and more about this workplace incivility and how these behaviors are problematic. And so we just started digging deep into the research. We went to a conference, a SHRM conference, and we ran a campaign. Remember the old school Got Milk commercial?
Yes.
So we ran a campaign called Got Civility. So we had this huge banner that just said Got Civility, and people were stopping by the dozens. Like we didn't have to wave anybody to our booth. They would walk by and see it and be like, "Oh, nope." You know what I mean? Like, what y'all got doing over here? So we knew that it resonated with our audience. And so from there, the orange mind and me just started like creating, and writing books and repurposing my content and reframing the conversation so that people can get accustomed. So when they hear civility intelligence, and all roads lead back to the EI guy or EI 365. And the same way I made emotional intelligence popular in our community, I'm going to make civility intelligence popular for the world.
From EI to CI guy.
There you go. But I'm going to keep the EI connotation just because it's the origin.
Sure.
And we're still talking about emotional intelligence. Mm-hmm. But in terms of branding and framework, it's really going to be, the civility intelligence and just making it a staple, making people believe it's a thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for that. I appreciate you sharing the story.
I appreciate your interest.
This conversation, DB, reminds us that emotional intelligence isn't just about being calm all the time. It's about being conscious, responsible, and intentional with what we feel and how we respond. And I think your story challenges the idea that growth is accidental, for one. It shows us that leadership starts long before the title. And healing doesn't erase the past, it reorganizes it. To our listeners, transformation doesn't require perfection. It requires awareness, practice, and the courage to pause. This has been The Dream Room with Amytra. Until next time, lead yourself well.
Get it!